Hello, this video will help you create a drawing sheet for the train body. So the first thing we want to do once Inventor is open is we want to go to New, and then we want to select the RH drawing sheet template and create. If you haven't installed the RH drawing sheet template, you'll need to go back and check out one of the other videos that I've posted in Canvas to teach you how to get the template or the RH drawing sheet set as a template so that it'll open in the right format every time. Now we always want to type in all caps for these fields. Part name, train body. We want to select the base. We choose the Open Existing File button. We're in a project folder that I created when I first started the train. And then I select Train Body. Click Open. Now this is not the front view. It may be the front of the train, but it's not the front view. So I'm going to rotate to here. This gives me a good view of what the train would look like. So that's going to be my front view. Then I'll just let the ghost little box move upward and click once, and then come over and click again, and then come down. And that's what we want to end up with. Now, I will say this. We will also have a back view or a rear view, because the front of the train doesn't look like the rear of the train. So we're going to need another view that we'll place. Let's go ahead and place it now. It doesn't really matter where you put it. Well, first of all, we want to go ahead and solidify what we have. So I'm going to right click and click OK. And so now I have these 4 images. We have the front view here in the lower left. We have the top view. We have the isometric view. And we have the side view. So I'm going to stretch these out just a little bit. Move this up into the corner. So you have to hover and then grab the dotted line that forms the box around the picture. And that's what you have to move if you want to slide things around. So I'm going to put... Let's slide this over a little more. I'm going to put the back view, the rear view, right here. We only have 1 or 2 dimensions to put on it, so I think that'll be okay. Actually, you know what? Let's slide this over, and we'll put the rear here. That will be fine. So, in order to get a rear view, we're going to go to Projected up here at the top. Another projected view. And it's, okay, I see what it's doing. Cancel. So select your train body front view, then do projected. And there is the rear. So I'm going to stamp it here and click create, but then I'm going to drag it over here. So what we may have to do is when we go in and dimension this, and put annotations on this drawing sheet, we'll probably label this as front and this as rear, just to make sure the folks that are creating this in the shop would be able to distinguish the front of the train versus the rear of the train from the drawings. I mean, you don't see this hole that you're drilling into for the hitch. You don't see that in any other view on here. So we need to make sure the folks in the shop that are creating the actual toy know where to drill the hole. All right. So now that we have our views placed, we just put dimensions. So in order to put dimensions on a drawing sheet, you have to go to the Annotate tab and then click Dimension. And there are a lot of dimensions on this drawing. This was a complex part to create. It would have taken what, 20, 30 minutes, give or take, to create the train body. That's a long time to create one part, so it's going to be very complex. It's going to have a lot of dimensions. So kind of know that going in. Now, we will also see some unique annotation tools that we're going to use. We're going to use the hole and thread note annotation tool, and then we'll also add in some text. So let's get started. First of all, we want to make sure we dimension the overall dimensions. Now, what I've done is I've just clicked on this bottom line like we would normally pull out dimensions, but you'll notice if we zoom in here, it did not select the entire base. So that's an error to watch out for, because if you turn this drawing sheet in and it says 5.25, and I see by these extension lines that you did not dimension the entire width, because this extension line doesn't go all the way to the edge, then I know you did it incorrectly and you probably didn't watch this video. So to properly set the dimension, we have the dimensioning tool. We want to click on the corners or the endpoints of the entire line. Notice that gives us 5.50 as opposed to 5.25. So that is a full overall dimension of the width of this block. Click OK. We want a complete full overall height. So we're going to click on the top line and the bottom line and put our overall height. Okay. And then we probably want to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Although these dimensions may not be completely necessary, simply because of the way we constructed the part. We may be able to get away without those, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. And then the final overall dimension would be dimensioning the depth. Now the depth can be dimensioned on the top view, or the depth can be dimensioned on either of the side views, or the front view and the back view, I should say. So those are overall dimensions. Now we need to go through and dimension these individual parts, these features. We've cut out features here. We've drilled holes. We've got fillets to make sure we dimension. So we have a lot more that we need to do. Let's just focus on one view at a time. From the front view here, we see that we have holes that we can dimension. We also have this cut out here for the window part. We have the fillets that we can dimension. We don't have a way to show from this view the cylinder that we created for the tank. I mean, we can see the total length. Maybe let's dimension that. Let's dimension from here to here. Put that in there. And then between these two measurements, we can then get an idea of how long this tank is supposed to be. So that's as for holes, anytime you drill holes, you're going to need to put a center mark to denote the center of the hole or the center of the circle. So we're going to use center mark here, and we're just going to place it in the middle of all of these arcs. And now, when we dimension the X and the Y locations of these holes, it'll be a little bit easier to see. Let's do that. So now we're going to dimension how far away this hole is from the bottom. And don't worry about these numbers getting juxtaposed. We will go back and fix that. For instance, this 0.5 can flip down to the bottom, or we can slide the 2.13 out to give us room, so we'll probably do that. But I'm going to place it here for now. And then we're also going to have to dimension, so that's the vertical dimension for the hole. We need to also dimension the horizontal displacement. So to clean this up, before we go any further, you want to hit escape to get out of dimension mode and make sure there are no modes selected. And now we can grab the dimension by the number and slide it. So I'm actually gonna slide that over just enough, and let's slide this back a little bit. My concern would be that 0.50 runs into 2.13, and that looks like a number with two different decimals, and that's just not good numeric notation. So we're going to grab the 50. I say we're going to do that. And there we go. We're going to flip it down. So the number is still here, but it doesn't run into the 2.13. Now, this is going to be a little bit trickier on this side because we need to dimension this hole as well. So I'm going to slide the 5.50 down a couple of notches. I'm going to slide this one down. You know what? We can do this, and that would clean it up. You know, once again, there are rules that we follow with dimensioning, where to place these labels, but the overall purpose and the overall goal is for clarity. So if we need to violate the rule about perimeter measurements, trying to keep them inside, I mean, we can do that if we did this. That's fine too. But when it comes to this one, I think clarity, not having it here and having it here, clarity is more important. By moving the 1.75 up top, we can now go back and we can dimension the hole as 1 inch. And now it's not cluttered. If I moved this 1.75 down here, it's cluttered. The last dimension for this hole would be the vertical dimension. And if you want, hit escape and you can grab that 50 and put it down below or leave it up top. It's up to you. The reason I'm moving it below is because I know I'm going to be dimensioning here, which it's better to get these other ones out of the way. Add another dimension. We need the X and Y coordinate here. So I'm going to go from the top of the part to get my... Now, you know what? Let's not do that. I'm going to dimension... Oh, we need to delete. So just back arrow, 1 notch. Now dimension again. And I'm going to dimension from the bottom of the part because that's going to give me a much better number, a whole number, or a more manageable number. Before, if you notice, it was 0.94, and that's not a true measurement because remember, the top here is an arc. And so when we created this hole, we actually measured from the bottom to the hole because you don't want to have something that's an arc, because if you measured this part of the arc, it's going to be different from measuring this part of the arc, the center of the arc. So this is the center of the arc, but it's not the front of the part where the drill press would start drilling. So it's probably best to go from a square bottom and measure upward to the circle. So that's why we put this here. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to slide this over just a little bit, just to pull these dimensions in away from that edge. Because once again, we're trying to keep numbers and measurements and dimensions and notes away from the perimeter for printing purposes. Not to mention, if the numbers are too close to the border, as you zoom out, you may not be able to see very clearly what the number is supposed to be. And then the final dimension for this is going to be the width dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and make room here and slide this up a little bit. And then we're going to dimension from the back of the train to the center of that circle. So what have we got? we've got dimensions for placement of the holes drilled, but we do not have information about those holes. So this one is simply the X and Y coordinates that we've already labeled, and also the radius of the arc. These holes down here, however, were drilled, if you recall when we constructed it, they were drilled to be threaded. So we need a hole note. We need a piece of information that tells us about the threading. So instead of a normal diameter dimension, we're going to use hole and thread. Hole and thread. And that will give us a lot more information. And there's no way to avoid crossing these lines. Well, I guess there is. You know, if I wanted to, I could grab this, put this back over on this side, and now the line isn't crossing, but that just, to me, that clutters it more on the left. So I'm going to leave it here. Stacking these dimensions like this is fine. We crossed one line here, but it doesn't distort the clarity any more than it already is, because it's a pretty, once again, it's a complex part. It's a complex shape, and so it has a lot of dimensions. So noticing the hole and thread note here, 1/4 inch 20 UNC. So 1/4 inch is the diameter. 20 UNC has to do with the thread spacing. Then we have -2B. So this part, 20 UNC -2B, that is really just telling you about the type of thread spacing and thread angles that we're dealing with. It's pretty, the UNC is a standard. You know, if you went to Lowe's or Home Depot and bought some screws, chances are they're UNC, unless you bought specialty screws or bolts. This arrow, this down arrow, I mean, if you think about it, the down arrow should represent depth. And that's what it is, 0.88. Now, you, at no point did you type in 0.88 when you constructed this part. But this has been rounded to 2 decimal places. All of these have just 2 decimal places. So I could, if I wanted to, change this to 3 decimal places, increase the precision, and then you would notice it was 0.875, which is what you did type in when you did the depth on this hole. You typed in 0.875. But it's okay if Inventor rounds it for precision purposes and to keep your number of sig figs. That's fine. Slide that over a little bit. Give us a little more room. Okay, so we're done with dimensioning the front of the train. Well, I take that back. We could, if we wanted to, we could dimension the fillet. But there's so many other places that we can dimension these fillets and rounds that there's no reason to force more dimensions on the front view. We can put it on any of the other views. So as a matter of fact, we're going to go to the top view and we're going to go ahead and do another dimension for a round. Now, I had a question about this in an email. They were having trouble pulling dimensions for these curves, for these arcs. And the reason is every time you hover over the arc, because it's so small, every time you hover over it, you get a green dot. So there's a big green dot. That's all I can select. I can't select between the green dots. So you really have to zoom in pretty tight and find a segment. There's a green dot. There's a green dot. And then there's a green dot. You have to zoom in and find a section that does not give you a green dot, but does give you a red line. And when you do that, no green dot, but I do have a red line, then I can click and pull out the radius dimension. So zooming in is important on these really small fillets and rounds. Once again, you never typed in 0.13, but you did type in 0.125. and the 2.5 rounds up to the 3. So it's just a matter of keeping two decimal places for our precision instead of 3. So this probably needs to have another little note added. Because we're measuring the round or the fillet, and it was the same all over the train, I'm going to put capital TYP period. Now, by adding that little bit of information, TYP period, I'm basically telling anybody that reads the sheet that the tiny little fillet here is the same all over the entire train body. So anytime I see a fillet, if I see it here, this little corner here is 0.13. If I see it here, it's 0.13. If I see it on this view, it's 0.13. So TYP means typical. The typical fillet used for this part was 0.13. And by saying that, I don't have to label it anywhere else, because I've already said 0.13 is typically the fillet used for this part. The last thing that we can dimension here is going to be the hole that we drilled for the smokestack to go in. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put a center mark for this hole. There's my center mark. Now, if you hover over it, you get a top half and a bottom half. You get two semicircles. If we do hole in thread note, we should be able to pull that information. Yeah, there it is. So we see the diameter and we see the depth from that hole in thread note. That's what we want. There's really nothing else that we can dimension, because everything else that we see from this view has already been dimensioned on the bottom view. Now, I would say this, not on the bottom view, I'm sorry, the front view. If we want to clean up a little bit of the clutter, we could move 1 or 2 dimensions to the top view if we wanted to. But I'm not sure that that would help us as far as clarity is concerned. So we're going to leave it as is. Now, dimensioning the 2 views back here at the back, or off to the side here. First thing I want to do is I want to put text in. And I want to make sure everyone knows that this is the front of the train. Oops. It's got to be in all caps. And I can hit escape and select. Oops. Hit escape to get out of the text mode, and then I can move this label a little bit closer. Then go back to text, and this is the back, all caps. There we go. So now we've labeled this as front and back. So any dimensions we put on here will be in the proper context. Hit escape. Let's slide this over a little bit more to give us a little more room. I'm worried about clutter between the dimensions on the front view and this view of the front. Slide these text labels over. Okay, so how are we going to dimension this view? Well, the big thing we need to make sure we do first and foremost is to dimension these 3 holes, because these 3 holes are the reason we have this view in the first place. So I've put center marks on these 3 holes, and then I'm going to dimension from the center to the bottom . Let's rewind that. Dimension from the center to the bottom. And then here, I want to put ×2, because I want the person reading this to know that I'm referring to both of these holes that have been drilled. They are both 0.13 from the bottom. And then I'm going to dimension this top center hole here. It's 0.63. So I'm putting it in two different places, one on the left and one on the right, which is fine. I may even hit escape and then drag this number down to the bottom here. I didn't put a space. I should probably put a space here. No, I'll leave the two. That's fine. You can drag the number back up if you prefer. This once again is just preference. If you want to kind of leave these terms, the label here front and back, if you want to leave those isolated so they stand out a little more, that's fine. We are going to have some other dimensions down here. We have to put in our we've got our y coordinates. We need to put in our x coordinates. And so that's going to cause a little overlap issue, possibly. So I need to hit escape and then drag that number to this side. And then maybe I slide this up here. Once again, it's about clarity. So there is no true right or wrong answer other than, is it clear? Have we increased clarity, or is it more congested and more difficult to read? So here, 0.38 from the side, I could also put a ×2, and then that would indicate the same thing on this side. So let's do that. Once again, if you're having trouble getting to the edit menu, make sure you've hit escape so that none of your buttons are selected. Then click on the number, double click on the number rather, and that'll bring up the edit menu. And then I'm going to space ×2 and hit OK. And so what that does is that just says this height and this width, this X and Y dimension, apply to both of these along the bottom. This one should be centered. So it is going to be dimensioned from the side to the center like this. Now, I do not like the fact that it's cutting across the word front. So I'm going to place it here. And I'm going to have to slide the word front down. Yeah, I don't like the way this is working out. So I'm going to slide front all the way down like this. Well, let's try this. No, that's not going to work either. All right. That'll just have to do. The last two things actually that I want to do is from this view, I can really see the arc of the top of the roof, and I can see the arc here. I can even see the fillet arc, but we're going to make sure we dimension the roof arc. And then we're also going to make sure we dimension the radius of the tank. Now, to do the radius of the tank, here's one other thing we need to do. I need a center mark for this tank, which there's the center there. So the center of this tank circle is here. So I'm going to dimension the height to the bottom. And I'm going to dimension left and right. Nope. Hit escape if you get something that's weird. Hit escape and then click dimension again and try it again. So from here to the left or the right, there's not a good place to put it. So you know what? Actually, I don't have to, because this hole and this hole, or this hole and the center here, are lined up the same. You can see the center marks, the little T shape here, the center marks are lined up exactly the same. I've already dimensioned this vertical piece on this center mark as 1 inch. I don't have to dimension this one again because they line up. Therefore, this one left to right must be 1 inch as well. So that would be a repetitive dimension if I used it. The only other dimension we need is information about the holes themselves. So I'm going to dimension one of, not dimension, I'm sorry. I'm going to click hole and thread, and I'm going to dimension this hole using a hole and thread note. And I can put it on either side. I think I'm going to put it here. Now, I need to also indicate that it's for all three holes. So I'm gonna hit escape, and I'm gonna double click, hit escape, and then double click on this information. And this is where I'm gonna type in capital T, capital Y, capital P, period. So for this view, this information is typical for all three holes. Now, I'm getting some clutter. Hit escape. I'm gonna grab the elbow here. I'm going to drag this over to this side. That's cleaner. And then I'm going to drag this up. There we go. That's what I want to see. You notice what I'm doing. I'm just trying to pull these dimensions, move them around, move the labels around so that I can read them a little more clearly. Finally, on this back piece, I see a dimension I left off. We'll go back and do that in a minute. All right, so finally on this back piece, I need to do two things. I need to dimension using a hole and thread note. This hole here. That's fine there. I'm going to put a center mark on that hole because that's the whole point of this back view. And then I'm going to dimension the hole both from the bottom and to the left and the right. Hit escape, and now we're going to move some of these labels around a little bit to clean it up. I think this... I'm going to move the one over here. I think that's okay. That'll get the information across anyway. Now, what I was referring to earlier is not having the height from here to here, or if you look from here to here. So I need to kind of record the thickness of this. So I'm going to have to hit escape. I'm going to drag this out just a little bit. I'm going to drag this out just a little bit. And so in here, stacked inside, I'm going to move this dimension. It's going to let me. I'm going to drag it. No, it's not going to let me. Okay. I'm going to put another dimension here. We're going to dimension here to here. Click OK. So far, boy, that's a lot of dimensions, isn't it? So we've dimensioned the hole we drilled in the back, we dimensioned the holes we drilled in the front, we've dimensioned the hole that we drilled on top for the smokestack, we dimensioned the window, we dimensioned the axle holes, and we've dimensioned all of the arcs, we've dimensioned the fillets, and the overall dimensions. It does look like it's pretty cluttered. Once again, if we had a printer that would print in wide format, meaning it would print very large sheets of paper instead of regular paper, then we would have a bigger drawing sheet to spread this out on. For our purposes, this is what we've got to work with. So if I hit escape, I can maybe drag this over just a little bit. And that opens up a little bit of a window here. That's what I want to do. But that's it. That's your drawing sheet. So once we have the drawing sheet complete, we want to save. Train body. I like to put drawing sheet. Just for clarity. It will save it as an IDW file as opposed to an IPT file. So we click Save. Then I want to go to File, Save As, and this time, instead of an IDW file, I want to go to File, Export, PDF. And now it's saving it as a PDF file. Still the same train body drawing sheets, fine. PDF, save. It is that PDF that you'll upload to Canvas. All right, I know this was a long video. We had a lot to do. So get the drawing sheet finished up and submit that for your credit. See you next time.